The following episode will contain spoilers. You have been warned.
You're listening to Cinema IRL, the podcast that throws you into the movie and asks the question, what would you do? What is up with all the mobsters trying to retire and have families? Don't they know it's eventually going to catch up with them? I guess not. Amber and Scott discuss the Alto Knights. And now, Cinema IRL.
I wish I could switch places for just one day.
What would you do?
Put yourself in my shoes.
How do we handle this?
What would you do?
Put yourself in my position.
What would you do?
Now it's your turn.
You want me to watch this movie again? Forget about it.
Forget about it. Yeah, here we go. This episode is about the Alto Knights. It follows two of New York's most notorious organized crime bosses, Frank Costello and Vito Genovese, as they vie for control of the city streets. Once the best of friends, petty jealousies, and a series of betrayals place them on a deadly collision course that will reshape the mafia and America forever. So that sounds like a good description, and it's a Barry Levinson film, and he's like a super acclaimed director. I believe he did Born on the 4th of July, along with many other very good films. And not only does it star Robert De Niro, it stars him twice.
It starts double De Niro.
Twice. He plays both of the mob bosses. I have to take ownership here. I did not watch the trailer because it seemed like a no-brainer. Robert De Niro plays two mob bosses. I'm like, okay, I'm sold. Take my money.
Megalopolis also seems like a no-brainer, too. Just want to note that.
Was that the Adam Driver film that we walked out of?
Yeah.
Oh, that was so bad. Yeah, so I didn't watch the trailer for this, and my bad. I am very sorry for that. I just thought you can't go wrong with Robert De Niro, but you have twice as much Robert De Niro and Barry Levinson. And it's a gangster mafia film, which is always good, action, compelling. This was a freaking snooze fest, bored out of my freaking mind.
So it's actually interesting. You and I have extremely different viewpoints on this movie.
Okay.
I thought the movie was extremely good, actually.
You want to marry it?
No. I thought it was a very good movie.
Okay.
It was well acted. I actually thought the story was decent. I'm just not a big gangster mobster in the 20s. Like that particular setting just isn't generally my jam in general. So most movies that are like that, I'm sure there are exceptions, but I'm not usually going to get too excited about that. So for me, it was just maybe the wrong movie setting, but I could recognize that the film was done pretty well. Yes, it was not exactly crazy action filled. It was a little slower than I probably would have expected. It picked up near the end. There was a lot of setup on this one, and it was, I don't know.
The Untouchables is a good mafia movie. Scarface is a good gangster movie. There are so many good mafia and gangster movies, and this
that might be part of the problem. There are a lot of good ones that it kind of sets a pretty high bar.
Well, I mean, because generally the genre is there's lots of betrayals, lots of bloodshed, and a very compelling plot where you're kind of almost at the edge of your seat of ooh, what's going to happen next? Robert De Niro and both of his characters were the most boring mob bosses ever.
Well, I think, though, probably they more reflect what a real-life mob boss is like rather than the way that they're depicted. Because
the real mob bosses of New York?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to think, listen, those guys don't need to be all that exciting because they have henchmen that do it for them.
The Godfather, Goodfellas.
I'm making an offer he can't refuse.
So many other good films. This was boring as heck. What would you do? Well, number one, I would not go to this film again, which I have I have said a couple times. Number 2, I would.
I have also noticed that anytime we come out of a movie in that theater, that particular like theater in that movie theater, you tend to be a little more down on it, mostly because you hate the seats.
Yeah, it's improved luxury seats, but the part that goes against your head is insanely hard, and it always gives me a neck ache. But that's not why I hated this film. I hated it because it was boring.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a few interesting topics on this one.
You'll have to tell me what they are because I don't know them.
Well, so there's the whole concept that of there's no honor amongst thieves, and I feel like who's Robert De Niro's character? The second one, the unhinged one.
Vito.
Vito. I feel like that was kind of Vito's general mindset throughout this whole thing was people don't change. You were, if you've been that way, you are that way. You will always be that way, and I've always got to be careful that you're going to be that way. Now, sometimes he was right and sometimes he was wrong. It turns out in the very last one he was right, but he didn't know how he was right. But it was fine. Like, who was the other one? Who's
Frank?
Like, when they tried to put a bullet in Frank's skull, and he's like, I'm out. Like, he's like, I'm done. I don't want to get freaking killed. Because he knows he's going to get killed if he sticks around. So he was like, I'm out. And if Vito had just let him be out, it would have been fine. But
Yeah,
Vito had to go kill his lawyer, basically. I think it was his lawyer. And I was like, no, well, now you made it personal.
Yeah, so these two characters grew up together as kids and ultimately became the same type of mobster gangsters, people that, had clubs during the Prohibition, and they divided up the territory basically of like, you have this area of New York and I have this area. Instead of one just taking control of it, they divvied it up, which seemed to create some problems because they didn't always see eye to eye, but they had this long history.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, Vito had to go away for a while early on. And
Yeah,
Frank
he got caught up during in Hawaii during the...
Yeah, Frank got a lot of territory because of that. And when he came back, like, I don't think he quite got the amount of territory back that he was hoping to get. And he was like, well, okay, well, I'll take what you're going to give me, and then I'll try to annex a little bit more.
So one of the topics that is lightly explored in this film is the relationships that Frank and Vito have with their wives. And Frank's wife, Bobby, seems to be a very conservative housewife who dotes on her two dogs, adorning them with fur coats, on their fur coats, while she's wearing a fur coat.
I saw you cringe during that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then we have Vito's wife, who owns a club. She's actually a self-made woman. And then we see that Vito is actually dipping into the proceeds from her club and stealing from her. And ultimately, after him cheating, she says, I've had enough. And she sues him. But in doing so, brings out all of the dirty laundry of the local mafia scene. And I have to say, she was insanely brave because she just threw it all out there. Like, he gets big envelopes full of cash, and he meets with these people, and he acts like he's poor, but he has multi-million dollars, and just said everything that you don't say.
Maybe he is poor. Maybe he gave it all to his whores.
Yeah. So what would you do? I don't know. I think if I had made the bad decision of marrying a mobster, I would like to think I would be as strong as she was, and I'm pretty sassy in my own right. But when it comes to mafia people who don't have any qualms with knocking you off and with just on their way to go get a pizza pie, I probably wouldn't do that.
If you're the uber sassy type, I don't know if marrying a mobster is necessarily the right move for you.
Yeah, it definitely requires a certain amount of discretion and taking secrets to your grave. And she just threw it all out there for everyone to see, which then had ripple effects beyond just her and Vito, affecting Frank and his wife Bobby and the entire mafia scene.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, actually, just a yeah on that one.
Well, what would you do if you were in Vito's shoes and you had? He was basically in Hawaii during the bomb and kind of got stuck over there for a while. And what would you do if you were in his shoes? You came back and you're like, wow, okay, things have changed, and I'm not in the same position I was.
I mean,
before.
If you're the type of person that's gotten to that level, who they are, you're not going to be content. I mean, that personality is never content. They're always going to want to push further and want more. And that's the thing that you have to realize is that, like you and I've made this, I've said this before about certain things in life, but he's always going to want 10% more than what somebody's willing to give. Or whatever he can get. Like, whatever he gets, he's going to want 10% more. And so you're never going to actually satisfy that guy. Unless he literally has everything. Unless he eventually ascends to be mob boss of the United States, which apparently we now know what
that's a thing now.
We now know what that looks like. You're not going to be satisfied. So...
Yeah, I mean, mob bosses are ambitious.
I mean, so Frank said he didn't think that Vito would be the type of person who would actually try to put a hit on him. And if he truly believed that, then it's fine. But if he did think that maybe this could happen, if I'm Frank, I keep him down. I do everything to keep him down because you don't want him putting a hit on you.
Yeah, when you have that kind of history, decades and decades of growing up with someone, yeah, I mean, you think you'll have your squabbles and your disagreements, but I understand how your mind wouldn't go to this person who knows me better than anybody who's seen me through, since I was a kid, would actually try and kill me.
Yeah, when you've got that guy that you're looking at and you're like, when I look at you, it's like looking at myself in the mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah, more De Niro jokes.
It's like Freaky Friday, but Mafia edition.
Freaky Friday mob boss edition. Yeah, it was... I mean, there's not a lot of what would you do's when it comes to mob boss movies for the most part. Like, mob boss is going to mob boss.
I mean, there's some. There's when, they had the big summit with all of the mob bosses from across the country literally coming together in a ceremony of sorts where Frank was going to step down and relinquish complete control
Pass
to
the torch
Vito.
and kiss the ring.
Yeah, but it turns out Frank had one last trick in his little bag and called in a tip from another state, had someone call in a tip from another state that got the state police sniffing around. And most of those mobsters from across the country questioned, hauled in, some of them charged and jailed, and actually highlighted the fact that the mafia wasn't a New York thing. It was actually a across the country thing.
Yeah, and to truly get out, he realized he was going to have to take down more than Vito. He was pretty much going to have to take down damn near everyone.
Yeah, and it appeared to have his hands clean at the time of like,
Yeah.
oh, I just got there a little late. And,
Yeah, I was on my way.
yeah.
So
what would you do in that respect? I think that's a good approach. I mean, it kind of sickens me to say this, but it reminds me of the plot that the judge and the rugby player had to take down Dave Creeley in The Rule of Jenny Penn, where, okay, we've got to take matters into our own hands and be creative and try and keep our own hands clean here to take somebody out. And I would like to think I would be that clever. I can definitely be that clever.
I mean, listen, if you ascend to the role of mob boss, There's two things that you probably are. Violent and clever. And
or at least accepting
fairly
of violence.
unethical. But
I think being indifferent to violence, because I think mob bosses mostly have people that do that stuff for them.
well, they don't need to be a violent person, but they need to be okay with being surrounded by violence.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. There's just not a lot of...
I know there was more, but I was just so freaking bored the entire time. And sadly, it was a long movie, a 2-hour-plus movie.
Yeah, if I was Vito's wife, I wouldn't have married Vito. Like, if you're that woman and you know who that guy is, you're like, oh, that can't end well.
Yeah.
That's not... I know who he is. He's gonna... Like, that's probably the only rule. What would you do?
Would you marry a mob boss? No. I mean, you're going to go out for nice dinners and have fancy clothes and nice jewelry and stuff like that, but you're married to a mob boss. So, number one, if you really love him, chances are pretty strong he's going to get taken out at some point and you're going to be a widow. Or number two, you're going to be caught in the crossfire of something and you're going to be surrounded by a lot of blood and violence.
So you're saying you wouldn't marry a mob boss?
Yes.
Interesting. Very interesting. I'll have to call a guy on that one.
We hope you enjoyed our episode. Thank you for listening. And to catch all the new episodes, please subscribe. We release 2 to 3 episodes weekly, so we'll have new content regularly. Until next time.